His day started out quiet and ordinary, the way he liked and assured himself of. The morning light of early autumn rose in the east and filtered through the old, cracked windows of the antique shop, carrying with it smells of dust and wood shavings and varnish. Every morning for 9 years, before the sun fully slipped from its covers, Clay had unlocked the old shop. The store was tidy and presentable, like a perfectly tailored suit, showcasing the uniqueness of all the antiques. Everything, as it always did, had its place. This morning he stood in the midst of them, carefully surveying the room and inventorying what he might need to acquire this week. Some items he found at estate sales, others, the more unique pieces, George brought his way. Most needed at the very least a good buffing. Typically they needed much more. They came to him as trash. But with hard work, tried and true elbow grease, there was rarely anything that couldn't be restored. There was no magic in it, but sometimes when he was finished, it felt otherworldly. A piece would arrive at his doorstep hopeless and pathetic, and leave him one day treasured and beautiful. Wax did wonders, so did sandpaper and paint. But the truth was, not everything could be fixed. It was this early part of the morning that he loved so much, before the busyness of the day began. At the back part of the shop, through the swinging doors, was his little slice of heaven, where the smell of sawdust stirred in him a delight he'd never been able to fully explain to another soul. Clay set his keys and coffee mug aside, keeping the front lights off because Mrs. Hartnett had a bad habit of dropping by before the crack of dawn if she saw a light on. He knelt beside the small rocker he'd been working on the last several days. An elderly man had dropped it off, hardly saying a word, paying for it in advance, even though Clay insisted he didn't need to do that. "What's your story?" he murmured, his fingers gliding over the now smooth wood. The chair was a hard-bitten thing when it came in, chipped and cracked and neglected, smelling vaguely of smoke. Whenever he worked on an old piece of furniture, or anything else for that matter, he found his mind wandering to possibilities of where it once came from, and how it had gotten to where it was now. Most pieces had spent dark days in attics and basements and back rooms that never heard footsteps. Somewhere in their lives they'd served a good purpose. The lucky ones stayed in the house, but sat invisibly in a corner or by a couch, an annoying place to have to dust, a thorn in the side of someone who wished it could be thrown away, except for the guilt attached because it belonged to a great-grandmother who'd spent her very last pennies to acquire it, or some such story. Yesterday he'd cut and whittled the rocker's new back pieces, and today he would stain them. Clay grabbed the sandpaper and walked to the table saw where the slats waited, lined up like soldiers. As he ran the sandpaper across the wood, he could practically hear the creak of the rocker and the laughter of delighted children in another century. He sighed, rolled up his sleeves, and sanded more quickly. Sometimes he thought he'd been born in the wrong century. There was hardly a kid today who would care about sitting in a rocker on the edge of a porch and watching a spring storm blow in. The world that he once thrived in had become a noisy, clangoring, messy place. But here in the shop, with sawdust spilling through shafts of dusty light, he found his peace. The sandpaper soon needed replacing, so he went to the corner of the room where he kept his supplies and reached for a new package. Then he snapped his wrist back at the sudden and sharp pain in his hand. It hurt like a snake had bitten him. Blood dripped steadily from the top of his hand, and he cupped his other hand beneath, trying to catch the droplets. Clay searched the corner, trying to figure out what had snagged him. There, on the old wooden gate he'd found in an abandoned field, barbed wire. The backside of the gate was wrapped in it when he'd found it, and he hadn't had time to cut it off yet. He looked at the wound as he walked to the sink. It was bleeding so fast that it was actually seeping through his fingers, dripping on the floor. What a mess. He ran it under the water. It was more of a puncture wound, but mightier than it looked. The blood poured, mixing with the water, and it didn't want to stop even for the phone. The shrill ring cut through the still air, coming from the rotary phone he had mounted on the wall next to the sink. Keeping his wounded hand under running water, he answered it. "Old-fashioned antiques." "It's me." "Lisa, hi. I'm kind of... I know, busy, as you always are.